Back in April 2023, actor Lorenz Tate sat down on the Earn Your Leisure podcast for what turned out to be a really compelling conversation about Black Hollywood as a whole. But then the discussion shifted towards something more specific: Black British actors working in American film and television. And that particular part of the conversation struck a nerve with a lot of people.
I'm cool with whatever it's going to be, but I feel like Hollywood believes there's more value in British Black actors than they do Black actors. And I think a part of it goes into that, oh, they have an audience over there, so they translate internationally.
And Lorenz Tate wasn't alone in noticing this pattern. He was far from the only voice pointing it out.
I'm sick of British actors playing Black American roles. And I don't just mean like American Black roles. I'm talking, this started from Idris Elba playing in The Wire. Then we had Cynthia playing Harriet. Then we had Daniel playing the dude from Judas and the Black Messiah. And now we have Damson playing Miles Davis. Y'all, even if these people are great actors, which they are, these are historical, ancestral roles that have plagued the Black American community for centuries. And we want to hire Brits because we're obsessed because they can easily switch into American actors.
Let's come back to Lorenz Tate's core argument. His position is that Black British actors are valued more highly than Black American actors in Hollywood, and that part of the reason for that is the built-in audience they bring from the United Kingdom. Now, that specific angle isn't something widely supported across the industry. It reads more as his personal perspective than a broadly held view. But when you look at what directors like Ava DuVernay and Spike Lee have actually pointed to, the conversation takes a different shape. They highlight the fact that many Black British actors come up through rigorous classical training institutions like RADA or LAMDA, and the majority of them build their foundation on stage in theater before ever stepping in front of a camera. That's a fundamentally different path compared to many modern Black American actors who often come into the industry through music videos or who started out as musicians and athletes first, people like 50 Cent, Will Smith, Tyrese, or Dwayne Johnson. These are individuals who weren't formally trained as actors, but who had the look, the presence, and the cultural pull to make it work. The argument is that Black British actors tend to arrive with stronger technical fundamentals, and on top of that, they've had to master the American accent to work in Hollywood, which by default gives them a broader range than someone who only has to speak naturally. And of course, we've seen this play out on screen. Black British actors and actresses have been cast in distinctly Black American roles: Damson Idris, Cynthia Erivo, Idris Elba, all bringing their craft to stories rooted in the American experience. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does any of this have to do with Druski? Fair question. Not too long ago, Druski released another skit called Release the Shackles, in which he portrays the role of an enslaved person.
You promise you go with me, huh?
Bro, stop talking like that. You ain't going to no big city. Master ain't gonna let you.
Yeah, I'm going with or without you.
Coming of this role in this character, I felt oppressed, like an American slave, like a lot of
In the skit, Druski portrayed himself as a Black British actor named Samson Dubois, someone who had no real connection to Black American culture, no lived experience with its history or its struggles, but who could pull off a convincing Black American accent. And because of that accent, he was able to step into the role convincingly. No cultural ties to the legacy of Black American slavery, no roots in that experience whatsoever, but he could imitate it well enough to not only pass, but actually deliver a strong performance. So much so that audiences genuinely believed he was Black American. And here's the thing about Druski. His skits are never just comedy for the sake of comedy. There's always something deeper underneath the surface. The humor is the entry point, but the message is what he's really after. So if you think this was just a funny bit with no larger point being made, you'd be missing the whole idea.
Hey guys, so listen, when we say delineation is necessary and that Black Americans are not the same as Africans, it's necessary. We need to protect our ethnicity, our own lineage. We are a different class of people. We are different people. We are not the same. That's not necessarily a good thing or bad thing. It's just a thing, and it's just the truth. We are not the same people. But since Everybody's all mad at me like I'm saying something, and like all the other Black Americans on the app that are saying this. There's a reason we need to delineate to protect our heritage and our lineage and our culture. But for some reason, you all don't understand that.
This is really where the heart of the argument lives. And to be clear, I'm not saying this is Druski's explicit message, but let's connect all the dots. The broader issue playing out right now in North America, particularly in the United States, is Black Americans trying to protect and preserve their cultural identity, while others, as Tariq Nasheed would put it, attempt to attach themselves to that culture without the lived experience behind it. Now, as one woman put it, she fully acknowledges that Black British actors are talented, and technically that's well earned. They come with more formal training and development than the average Black American actor breaking into the industry. But that acknowledgement doesn't change the core concern. Those roles, particularly roles rooted in Black American history and experience, should be going to Black Americans. There's something historically off about actors coming from Britain to occupy Black American spaces, and in doing so, taking opportunities away from talent within the community that may never get the visibility it deserves, simply because they can't compete on a technical level with someone who trained at a conservatory for years. The argument is that Black American history should be told by Black Americans, and that starts with protecting who gets cast in those stories. That tension came into sharp focus with British actor David Oyelowo, and it surfaced again when Cynthia Erivo was cast as Harriet Tubman, a role that many felt should have gone to a Black American. The position is straightforward. Black British actors should be advocating for representation within their own community and their own stories, particularly given that the majority of Black British people trace their roots to the Caribbean or Nigeria. Now, someone could push back and say that argument isn't entirely fair. So let's look at it from the other direction. What happens when Black American entrepreneurs or creatives try to step into someone else's cultural space? We saw a clear example of that in 2021, when Michael B. Jordan launched a rum brand called Juve. The response was swift, and it was not welcoming. The backlash came fast, led by voices like Nicki Minaj and a wave of people from Caribbean backgrounds. And here's what makes that situation particularly interesting. Nicki Minaj has benefited enormously from Black American institutions, hip-hop, the cultural ecosystem built around it, and labels like Young Money, which itself grew out of Cash Money Records. That's the foundation that gave her the platform she has today. But the moment Michael B. Jordan wanted to build a rum brand connected to Caribbean culture, the doors closed immediately. Juve is a deeply significant festival. It marks the beginning of Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, and the sentiment was clear. This belongs to us, not you. The argument was that a non-Trinidadian trademarking that name amounted to cultural appropriation and an attempt to profit off a heritage that wasn't his to claim. Then there's the situation involving Beyoncé that surfaced around 2016. There were reports that she was being considered to portray Sarah Baartman, the South African woman who was paraded across Europe in the 1800s as a so-called exhibition, reduced to a spectacle because of her physical appearance. She became known by the deeply dehumanizing label, the Hottentot Venus. When word got out that Beyoncé might take on that role in a biopic, South African critics, including people connected to Baartman's own tribe, pushed back firmly. The position was that Beyoncé lacked the ancestral connection to that story, and that a role of that weight and specificity should go to a South African woman. Honestly, I don't have a strong disagreement with either of those arguments, but if that standard holds, then the same logic has to apply to Black British actors stepping into Black American roles. Nobody questioned whether Michael B. Jordan had the financial means to launch that brand. Of course he did. The issue was about ownership of culture. And that's the exact same conversation that needs to happen when Black British actors can walk into spaces, portray experiences they have no personal connection to, and build careers by attaching themselves to a community whose history they haven't lived.
Essence Festival showed the world that we're delineating from these people. They can't get nothing popping in America without tethering on to us.
The Essence Festival made something very clear to anyone paying attention, that there is a growing separation happening, and that Black American culture remains the engine that others depend on to gain traction in this country. Nothing gets momentum in America without connecting back to that foundation. And Essence is worth examining here because it's directly relevant. The festival is currently owned by Richelieu Dennis, who is Liberian. And if you've been watching the last several Essence festivals, particularly in recent years, the atmosphere has shifted noticeably. It's taken on more of a West African and Caribbean identity than it traditionally carried. For many people, it no longer feels like a Black American cultural event. It feels like something else entirely. And that tension is at the center of a much larger conversation that's been building for a while. What Druski's skit actually brings into focus, beyond the comedy, is that yes, Black British actors are occupying these roles, but the deeper question is why that's happening in the first place. Look closely at the skit itself. The director reads as white. The producer reads as white, and that's the real issue sitting underneath all of this. If you are not producing your own films and financing your own stories, then you don't get a seat at the table when it comes to deciding who tells those stories. The producer is chasing the best execution of their vision at the best possible price point. If a Black British actor can deliver a convincing Black American performance, has the technical training to back it up, and can do it for less than an established Black American actor whose rates have climbed, then from a purely business standpoint, that decision makes itself. That's not an indictment of the British actors, that's a structural problem. If Black Americans want ownership over how their stories are told on screen, the answer is doing what Tyler Perry did, putting your own capital behind it and building the infrastructure yourself. Without that, the budget will always belong to someone else, and whoever controls the budget controls the casting. Lawrence Tate framed the issue as being about range or transatlantic audience reach, but the reality is more straightforward than that. It comes down to value. Technical versatility plus lower cost equals an easier decision for producers who have no personal stake in the cultural conversation. And that's exactly what Druski's skit is quietly pointing at. It's funny on the surface, but underneath it, it's holding up a mirror to tensions that everyone in this space already feels, but rarely addresses this directly.